But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with.
We know that since there have been ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine that started in the spring, Russia has significantly ramped up their attacks against Ukraine.
Washington set a countdown. Moscow rolled its eyes. That is the short version. The long version is louder, messier, and a little funny if you like gallows humor. Donald Trump tried to muscle Vladimir Putin with deadlines and tariffs. Putin did not blink. No deal, no retreat, no photo op. The only thing that moved fast was the White House schedule. The deadline drama. Late July 2025, Trump unveiled a 50-day clock, negotiate a Ukraine peace deal, or face 100% tariffs on all Russian exports. He tied the warning to a bigger stick. Any country that kept trading with Russia would face tariffs too.
President Donald Trump is ramping up the pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine.
Of course, while the president was meeting with NATO Secretary General Rutte, and the announcement that was there today was that the U.S. would be sending Patriot missiles.
The message was simple. Stop buying from Moscow or pay at the border. That long fuse did not last. On August 5th, the White House yanked the timer down to a week and change. 10 to 12 days. August 7th to 9th. The threat escalated. Substantial tariffs. Secondary sanctions. The targets were obvious. India, China, the buyers of Russian oil. On August 8th, the punch landed. The United States slapped an extra 25% tariff on Indian imports. Total duties jumped to 50%. The move tied directly to New Delhi's oil purchases from Russia. The White House hinted at future steps on China. Reporters sharpened pencils. Markets took a breath. Moscow ordered tea. Kremlin reaction. The Kremlin stayed ice cold. Dmitry Peskov said Russia took note of the remarks. Then he said the special military operation would continue. He framed the new tariffs as familiar. Russia had built an immunity, he argued. Years of Western sanctions had trained the system. Translation: your threats are old news.
But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days.
He's growing increasingly frustrated with Vladimir Putin. Now the question is, will he come back to the negotiating table with this new announcement?
Dmitry Medvedev called the ultimatum theatrical. He said Russia felt indifferent. He seemed to enjoy the microphone. Sergei Ryabkov called ultimatums unacceptable and futile. The language sounded routine. The body language said, try again. Putin's red lines. The Russian position stayed firm. Putin wants full control of 4 regions: Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia. No ceasefire talk before that. No neutral Ukraine on Western terms. No quick swap of land for peace. Those points have not shifted. They framed every response. Economic shield. Kremlin analysts saw limited damage from more tariffs. Russia sells oil to China and India. Both have scale. Both signal that their buyers will keep buying. Russia has reoriented trade to Asia. That is the story from Moscow. The West runs punishment. Asia runs payment. A crude but workable loop. Diplomacy without traction. Trump did not only swing tariffs, he also sent an envoy. Steve Witkoff flew to Moscow. He made 5 trips since January. The agenda was peace terms. The output was thin. Proposals for prisoner swaps, humanitarian corridors, no ceasefire framework, no territorial rollback, hard meetings, softer deliverables. The runway kept extending. The wheels never left the ground. India pushes back. New Delhi did not smile. The new 50% duty hit key exports. India called the move unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. The message centered on energy security. India needs fuel. The market is tight. Prices swing. Volumes matter. Delhi framed the duty as punishment for meeting basic needs. The tone was blunt. The mood was sour. China signals defiance. Beijing called its trade with Russia legitimate. Chinese officials warned that secondary measures would not stop oil imports. The number speaks for itself. Over $240 billion a year in energy flows. China linked the point to principle. National decisions on energy supply would not bend to foreign pressure. That is China's public line. That line has not moved. Why unilateral tariffs misfired. Sanctions need partners. That is the core lesson. The United States tried to police not only Russia but also its buyers. Without lockstep support from the EU, the UK, and major Asian economies, enforcement weakens.
Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
Missile barrages nearly every night in Ukrainian cities. So it appears so far that that's what really spurred the president into action, because
Workarounds spring up, financing shifts, cargoes reroute, insurance adapts, the pain spreads, but the target adapts, the signal fades, the leverage drops, mixed signals from the clock. Deadlines work when the threat is credible. The White House cut its own 50-day window to less than 2 weeks. That undercut the original message. Moscow read that as wobble. Washington looked rushed. The more the timeline shifted, the less serious the threat felt. Russia waited out the noise. The limits of tariff theater. Tariffs raise costs. They do not force surrender on core security goals. Moscow sees Donetsk and Luhansk as existential stakes. Zaporizhzhia and Kherson sit in the same bucket. A duty on Indian textiles does not pry those claims loose. That is not a moral judgment. It is a power calculation. If you target a central war aim with a border tax, you get press. You do not get capitulation. Ukraine pays the price. While leaders dance on timelines, Ukraine absorbs strikes. July set records for long-range Russian drone and missile attacks. Civilian losses rose. Power grids suffered. Housing fell. Diplomacy stalled while artillery spoke.
But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with.
we know that since there have been ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and Ukraine that started in the spring, Russia has significantly ramped up their attacks against Ukraine.
Every week without a framework tax on new damage. War fatigue grows. Aid debates drag. The map shifts in small bites. The human cost is not small. Steve Witkoff's shuttle. The envoy route kept going. Allegedly 5 trips since January. FaceTime with Putin. Messages back to Washington. The talks found narrow openings. Prisoners, corridors, medical transfers. Those wins saved lives. They do not change the war. The airport lights stayed on. The main runway stayed blocked. Why India matters. India is a swing buyer. Indian refiners pull in Russian crude. They ship products onward. They balance domestic price and supply. They keep inflation in check. They do not want lectures during a squeeze. Tariffs on their exports land as a slap. The response is predictable. Hardened stance, public complaint, quiet diversification where possible, open defiance where not. Why China matters more. China is the ballast. The scale of Chinese demand gives Moscow a floor. Oil flows, gas flows, coal flows, payments settle through banks that avoid Western reach.
Russia and Ukraine, and would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war, I'm trying to get you out of it.
To the negotiating table with the United States and Ukraine about how to end this war.
If Washington wants to cut that flow, it needs partners across the Pacific and Europe. Without that, unilateral steps feel like noise against a freight train. Secondary sanctions are blunt. Secondary sanctions sound tough. They try to force third countries to choose. Trade with the target or trade with us. That move carries risk. It can alienate partners. It can push them to hedge away from the dollar system. It can complicate trade talks on separate files. Use the tool with a coalition and it bites. Use it alone and it sparks resentment without compliance. The credibility gap. Moscow judged the threats as talk without teeth. That is the line from Peskov, Medvedev, and Ryabkov. The Kremlin projected boredom.
Well, Muga, this seems to be the big statement that the president had teased last week, this big Russia announcement. He said there will be a 50% tariff if they don't have peace with Ukraine in 50 days. That would be on September 1st. So that's what the president is announcing.
The goal was simple. Make the ultimatum look unserious. Tell publics at home and abroad that Russia has seen this before. Signal emotional control. Invite the White House to overreact. Then wait. The cost of moving the goalposts. Changing a deadline looks tactical in briefing rooms. It looks erratic to adversaries. The first clock said resolve. The second said hurry. The third said confusion. That pattern gave Moscow an easy narrative. Washington blinks. Whether fair or not, that frame stuck long enough to drain leverage. What would bind leverage? Coordinated sanctions with the EU, G7, and Asian partners. Synchronized enforcement on shipping, insurance, finance, and tech exports. Clear carve-outs for humanitarian needs. A roadmap for sanctions or relief tied to precise steps.
On Russia, if they don't come, or 100% tariff on Russia, today, really ramping up the pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin. The question, though, is will he respond to that pressure and come back?
More air defense for Ukraine, more budget support, more spare parts, a credible promise of reconstruction aid if the guns go silent, carrots and sticks in one folder, shared by allies, signed in public. Why humanitarian steps still matter. Prisoner swaps and corridors save lives now. They do not resolve borders. Still, they build habits of contact. They reduce escalation risk. They show families that policy is not blind. Every transfer home buys a little social trust. You need that later when real terms hit the table. The domestic shadow. Any pressure on India and China ripples into US politics. Indian tariffs hit US firms with supply links. Talk of measures on China touches consumer prices. Congress asks why allies feel punished. Governors ask about ports. Retailers groan. The White House must juggle a war aim with kitchen table costs. That tension shows on TV. Putin's calculus. He believes time helps him more than his opponents. He sees war weariness in Western capitals. He hears debates on aid. He watches elections. He reads shifts in media tone. He knows his red lines. He keeps pressure on the battlefield. He offers narrow humanitarian gestures to look reasonable. He waits for cracks in coalitions. He has done this before. Trump's calculus. He favors hard lines and fast wins. He likes visible tools. Tariffs fit the brand. Deadlines fit the show. He wants movement he can announce. When Moscow shrugs, he doubles the pressure on buyers. That creates a headline. It also creates blowback. The gap between theater and outcome widens. Critics pounce, allies frown, staff scramble. Why multilateral backing is not optional. Sanctions work when loopholes close in every major port and bank. That means Brussels, London, Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore, and others move in sync. If even two of those stay half open, money and goods flow through. The target adapts. The press release looks tough. The trade data looks normal. The target keeps fighting. What Ukraine needs while clocks tick: air defense systems, ammunition, repair kits, budget support to pay teachers, nurses, and soldiers, power grid parts, demining equipment. If diplomacy stalls, logistics and protection keep the country alive. That is not a slogan. That is a quarterly to-do list. Every gap invites more strikes and more displacement. The humor nobody asked for. Washington loves a countdown. Moscow loves a shrug. Delhi loves a press conference. Beijing loves a principle. None of that fuels ambulances in Kharkiv. If the goal is peace, clocks and quips do not cut it. They do fill panel shows. They do spike social clips. They do not move trenches. What a win would even look like. A ceasefire that holds, verification on the ground, pullbacks in defined zones, international monitors, a phased sanctions relief schedule tied to actions, not vibes, a reconstruction fund for Ukraine, security guarantees tested in drills, a clear mechanism to snap penalties back if terms break. None of that fits in a week. All of that needs allies. The lesson in plain words: unilateral tariffs did not move Putin. Shortening deadlines undercut the threat. Hitting partners without building a bloc created backlash. Russia leaned on Asia. The war ground on. The scoreboard did not change. The only way to change it is coalition work that hurts where it counts and helps where it matters. Where to from here? Pull allies into a single plan, map the evasion routes, close them together, offer a phased off-ramp that rewards compliance step by step, keep support flowing to Ukraine to set real leverage at the table, use the envoy track for swaps and corridors while the big work advances. Stay boring, consistent, and credible. That style wins over time. Closing thought. Trump's Kremlin ultimatum exploded on contact with reality. Putin refused to flinch. The episode did not end the war. It did expose the limits of solo pressure. Peace in Ukraine needs unity, patience, and precise tools. Not louder clocks. Not higher tariffs without friends. Strategy beats spectacle every time.